What is your name?
My name is Paul Seyfert.
How long have you lived here?
All my life, and I'm 77, so I lived in Delmar, in the country, all my life. So,
What brought you and your family to Delmar? What brought you and your family to Delmar?
well, my grandparents came here. They originally were from Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania Dutch is our ancestry. So I don't know just how long, probably in the early 1800s they came. And they kind of originated in Lost Nation, and they moved this way towards Delmar. So that's kind of our background of how we got here. They were always farmers. So that's what I've been all my life too. So.
What was life like in Delmar when you were growing up?
Well, life was much simpler back in the 40s and 50s. I was born in 1939, and I was raised on a farm, and I always said the generation of the decade of 1950s was a wonderful time, and life was much simpler. Didn't have all the cell phones and social media that irritate people today, but life was fun, and putting every household in the country were farmers then. Now there's a lot of people live in the country that don't farm. You know, they just live in the house, and some of the houses have disappeared. But you worked with your neighbors, and you used to visit with your neighbors, and you had family reunions, and we used to bale hay and bale straw with 4 of our neighbors back in the 50s, and just a good time, quite different than it is today when everybody's kind of on their own, but it was people were very socially minded back then to help one another, and as they are today too, but it was really a fun life back and earlier on.
What are your favorite memories from growing up?
Well, I was in 4-H. That was part of, every rural child was in 4-H. Everybody had livestock, and they had projects of, they call them club calves in 4-H, or you had pigs, and then town kids started joining 4-H in the excuse me, in the 50s also, and they had projects of photography, and so that was one of the projects. It was fun, and we played basketball. We used to play basketball and baseball on Saturday and Sunday afternoons. Your neighbor friends would come over and play baseball and football in the front yard, and just didn't run off to town to do something. You kind of stayed at home and played with what you had, and you usually had some good friends that you were close with, and some of the town town kids used to love to come out to the country and play because there was more room, and used to shoot pigeons and things like that. So a lot of memories of growing up that were things were just a lot simpler than they are today. So.
How has Delmar changed over time?
Well, Delmar used to be a bustling community, even back before my time. The railroad tracks came through here with Milwaukee and Northwestern Railroad, and Delmar was quite a railroad town. People would come from 30, 40 miles radius around Delmar to get on the train. And the train went from Chicago to San Francisco or Los Angeles. So the depot up here, which has been restored, was a bustling part of the community back then. Lots of people came to get on the train. So, and way back, my mother used to tell way back in the 30s and 40s, Delmar had a doctor, had a dentist. Maybe one time we had 3 taverns, which wasn't, it kept people busy, I guess, but and we had 2 grocery stores, and of course the school was a center of activity back then too. But Delmar was quite a bustling community back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and Just trying to think of some other things. We had, a couple of gas stations, and way before convenience stores, they were all privately owned, and had a mill, a grain elevator downtown, which is still here, and there were plumbers and a blacksmith. So Delmar, which all small towns had, they were kind of self-supporting back then. So it's every small town has changed a lot, but Delmar with the railroad, with the depot, was really a hub of activity back then.
What were the downtown buildings like before they were empty?
Downtown buildings? Well, we used to have a hardware store, which is no longer there. It was people came from miles around to the hardware store. First people I remember running it was Hazel and Percy Casson. That was back in the 30s and 40s, and used to have a barber shop, and had a car dealership way back. The Rasmussen family name. They eventually moved to Maquoketa, started in Delmar, and they were one of the largest General Motors dealerships in the state at one time. They started in Delmar, and kind of forget what else. There's several grocery stores, but the buildings were kept up nice back then, and people had a lot of pride in the appearance of their business, and had two banks at one time, I believe, but had a bank building was always a nice, well-kept building, and the grocery stores, and so a lot of them have disappeared, and a few that are here aren't kept up like they were way back, but that's the way it is, I guess.
What is special about Delmar to you?
Special about Delmar to me? Well, I'm proud to be from Delmar, which everybody can say about their small hometown, I think. But I think you take pride in your hometown. You're glad to say you're from Delmar, as everybody would about their hometown. But well, and I should say we had two churches. Used to be three churches. Growing up with our churches, we went to the Methodist church, and then they have the Catholic church, and years ago there was a Presbyterian church, which was down by the post office, and that's torn down now. But my mother went to the Presbyterian Sunday school way back in that'd be 1910 or 20s, back in there when she was a child. But everybody is, I'd say everybody's proud of their hometown, but I'm just glad to be called a Delmarian. How's that? That's not a word used very often, but everybody's proud to be where they're from and with their family in the community and so forth. So just glad to be from Delmar.
What makes you stay in Delmar?
Well, I always raised on a farm, and then I started working at the grain elevator in Delmar in 1982, I think it was. So I guess when you're unless you're going to leave the farm, if you're going to be a farmer, you usually stay around where you were raised. But some people choose to take another vocation and leave their hometown. But I always liked the farm. Then I started working off the farm at a grain elevator and fertilizer plant. And it kind of, I've often said some people leave the town, but to keep a town together, some people have to stay in Delmar in their local hometown to keep the community going. Lots of people move in and out of Delmar today, but there are some families that have stayed around for years and years, and not as many as there were 15, 20, 30 years ago, but there's still a group of families that have been here a long time and continue to stay here. So it's a good farming area, good soil around Delmar, and if you're going to be a farmer, why you kind of stay where you're at, the place you were born. My family always fed cattle, and my nephew still continues to do that, so I rent my farm to him. So that's kind of our background, is grain and livestock, mainly cattle. Used to milk cows years ago like everybody else did. Had cows and chickens and pigs, and you kind of had a varied, livestock, but now people tend to specialize in one species of livestock. So,
what makes Delmar feel like home?
well, I could probably the people that you were raised with, and would make you feel at home. And not only the ones you're raised with, but new people. You're glad to welcome new people into the community, and you just feel comfortable with some of our families here yet, and some have moved away, but we're just, when you're raised here, I guess it always feels like home. But I'll always feel at home in Delmar.
If you could leave Delmar, would you, and why?
If I could leave Delmar, I'm too old to leave Delmar now. I like to travel, but I wouldn't leave Delmar at my age, where I might have to move to town someday. I don't know about that, to Maquoketa or somewhere you would go to town, but at my age, I probably wouldn't be leaving Delmar. Not in my plans anyway, but I guess the reason, if I did have to, the reason would be of age, maybe going to a house in town, but not a nursing home yet. So I plan on staying in the country in our farmhouse till, as long as I'm able to. So,
If you close your eyes and think of Delmar, what comes to mind?
if I close my eyes and what?
If you close your eyes and think of Delmar, what comes to mind?
Oh. Well, I guess if you think of Delmar, you tend to think away in your past how booming town it was, and 4-H activities, school activities. As you get older, you like to reminisce. You'll find that when you get older. Because when you're young, you don't have anything to reminisce about. But when you get older, there's all kinds of memories come into your head. So, if I close my eyes, I think of, being a child going to school here, 4-H activities, church activities, Sunday afternoon ball games, and friends that would come over. And, on Sundays we used to go visit people too. Folks would get in a car, you'd go take a ride, and you'd stop in and see somebody, see a neighbor or something, go to somebody's house. Today you wouldn't think of stopping at somebody's house unless you called ahead and made an appointment. But years ago you just stopped, and they'd have a cup of coffee and a piece of cake ready for you. But as you reminisce, you think of the memories of growing up and the good times you had.
How important is the school to Delmar?
The school to Delmar is very important. This school was, the new part was built in 1916, and it was one of the first consolidated schools in the area. And we had a 75th anniversary years ago of the high school. The school is the hub of a community, and I know communities that have lost their school, it really is really hard on a small town. But we've kept our grade school here. Lots of consolidation has taken place, but we were able to keep our grade school, and the high school goes to Macokota, and which has worked out very well for us. But the school years ago, well, all small towns, that was the, grandparents and aunts and uncles all came to ball games, whether it was baseball or basketball. Didn't have any football, but the basketball games years ago, the gymnasium would be packed. The lunchroom downstairs, downstairs, it used to be the old gymnasium. I don't know if you know that or not, but it was they called it a cracker box back then. But the place was packed on ball game nights because it was the social part of the week for people to come and get together. They always served lunch at a lunch stand, and everybody came to the ball games and yelled for their kids, grandkids, or nephews, or whatever. But school building is a very important part of a town, and those that have lost their school, it hurts the town. But it's just the way life has been. They can't always afford to keep a school open, and bigger schools are offering more subjects and so forth. So kind of sad the way it is, but that's the way things turned out. But
Can you tell me about the street you live on?
about what?
Can you tell me about the street you live on?
The street? Yeah, we have a street now. Years ago, country roads didn't have a street. They just were a road, but now we have numbers. We have a street and avenue just like in town. But, well, our street, we had three of our families' names living on it. There were 3 farms, and there were 3 different Seyfert families living on our street. And they've all the people have changed since when I was a child, of course. One of the houses is gone, and we're on 115th Street, but all different people live there now than when I was in school. But they're all nice, good, friendly neighbors, and that's part of one of the nice things about living in the country is your neighbors. Maybe don't know them as good as they did back when I was a kid, because you all work together more so. And not everybody that lives on our street is a farmer anymore. Some of the farms they just live in the house and somebody else has bought the land. But we have very nice neighbors in our street.
Did you walk to school as a kid?
No, well, I always rode our first bus was a car. A school bus was a car. And he would pick up 6 or 8 families, and I think we could get 6 or 7, 8 kids in the car. And I can brag about this. When the roads were muddy way back, before the roads were all graveled, we had a horse and buggy would come and pick us up. 1 horse and a buggy, and the horse's name was Billy the Great, and he was a great racehorse, a trotter, they called him. And then we had a school bus later on. I can remember all the school bus drivers' names, but I never had to walk, but lots of kids did, my age and older. But I never walked, but we had fun times on the bus.
What are your favorite memories of Delwood?
Of Delmar?
Of Delwood School.
Oh, you remember all your teachers and school activities, baseball and basketball, and I think I say teachers, you always remember your teachers. Some of them were, you remember the strict ones that made you behave, and just all the activities of school. We had school plays and your studies and your sports and just a lot of good memories of school days. All your friends, and some of them have passed on now, and now we have school class reunions and school reunions, and it's always good to see people you only see once a year perhaps, and some have passed on, which is sad, but lots of memories of schoolmates, classmates.
What do you wish people knew about Delmar?
What do I wish people knew about Delmar? Well, it's kind of a tough question of what they wish they knew. I think they know we're a friendly community here in Delmar, and just every small town has its pride, but I think people know a lot about Delmar. I don't think we'd have to tell them too much, but Delmar's pretty well known for its history and friendly people and activities we have. We have a Lions Club in Delmar, which I should mention, and we have lots of activities, and kind of the only fraternal organization in Delmar outside of we have the two churches, but I think Delmar's pretty well thought of.
What do you want Delmar to be like and look like in the future?
Well, I hope it continues to grow in population. We're might be kind of landlocked as far as expanding too many more houses, but one reason people come to Delmar is this very school. It's a very good school. I know some people just moved in and they looked at other communities and they came to Delmar because of this school, because they have some children. And I think Delmar's really improved. Everybody has a lot of pride keeping up their buildings and their homes and their yards, and I think it'll continue to improve. It looks nice now, but I think it'll continue to be that way. And I think it'll be continued to be thought of well, and maybe increase in population due to the school. Lots of people live here and work in Davenport, Clinton, Dubuque, wherever, and so hope it continues to grow and prosper.
What would you like to see in Delmar in the future?
Oh, I don't know if we're too big on industry, if we'd have any companies come in or not, but I just hope like to see it continue to prosper with the school, and I don't think it's, companies aren't going to come into Delmar. It's too small, but neighboring Macokota and DeWitt are growing with industry and new homes, but I just don't see Delmar growing industry-wise, but I think it'll continue to prosper with the school mainly.
Finally, what is your favorite superhero?
Oh, good question.
What is your favorite superhero? And
Superhero?
why?
Oh boy.
And why?
Kids ask that question today. What's a superhero? I guess I would. It could be sports. It could be a family member. I guess in sports, I always liked Mickey Mantle. Although I'm a White Sox fan, I always liked the Yankees too. So, and of course, you look at your heroes, you think of your parents too. your grandparents, and some ministers we've had were heroes to us too. So I might have more than one superhero. Is that okay?
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome. I'm honored to be invited.